forget to do that. So welcome. How's everybody's week been so far? I know a lot of you just came off spring break, so I'm jealous because it's really busy. We're about to start advisement. Registration opens on April the 5th, so it's getting busier and busier for us. So no spring break, but hopefully if you had spring break, you enjoyed it and got some time off. So tonight we're going to do a couple things. I'm going to, again, just show you kind of a couple things in Moodle for week 3. So some of you I know that are ready to kind of move forward. We're going to introduce anybody that we missed from last week that maybe wasn't with us. I'll answer any questions you have, and then I want us to get into some content tonight concerning data and how we're going to go about looking at that and reviewing. So let's start off first. Does anybody have any questions? I know y'all have been like the best, easiest class I have had. Y'all are really low maintenance, which is you know, I like it, but I think you guys are just really doing a great job. So that's awesome. Was there anybody with us tonight that wasn't with us last week that would like to introduce yourself? And I can see who you are, so I will call on you shamelessly. But if you would please volunteer, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, yes, my name is Barry McCombs. I wasn't here last week, but I am here this week.
So Barry, I'm sorry, I should have given you some better instructions. So you want to tell us?
I don't know what you really want, so.
Yeah, sorry. I've been knee deep in curriculum sheets all day and calculating credits. So yeah, I'm a little brain dead. So tell us who you are, what you do, and where you work, and what you're hoping to learn or get out of this class.
Okay, I'm in New Jersey. I teach high school, and I teach accounting, personal finance, and sports and entertainment marketing.
Oh, wow. That's a lot.
I've been doing that for 5 years. Prior to that, I spent 38 years in corporate America. So I retired, and but I didn't retire from life. I decided that I wanted to do this. I always wanted to be a teacher. However, putting four children through college, I don't mean any harm to anyone. Teacher's salary didn't work for me, so.
I understand. Well, welcome. We're glad to have you. Who else is with us tonight that wasn't with us last week?
I wasn't with y'all last week. I'm Suzanne Nugent. I'm from Kenner, Louisiana. I am the gifted, talented assistive technology and extended school year coordinator for my district. I just had shoulder surgery a couple of weeks ago, so I am recovering from that right now. And I've spent 24 years in the classroom. 17 of those were in the middle school.
Welcome. That's you know, I'm sorry you're having to go through and recover from surgery, but we're glad you're with us. And yeah, it sounds like you wear a lot of hats too. So glad to have you in class. Okay. Anybody else from last week that we missed?
Wow.
Sorry, I'm trying to look. Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, I'm Melissa Joback. I teach in Tallahassee, Florida. I used to teach exclusively special ed in the Atlanta school system. I'm at an independent school, which is a private school, and it's much different than my student population that I used to have, where I was pretty much Title I students. I had no parental support, to now probably too much parental involvement, and they know everything, and they feel as if, and my children go to this school too, but since they pay tuition, that there's certain things that they should get. I'm in our school goes from pre-K 3 to 12th grade. Sorry, son's in a Spider-Man's costume.
Oh, he is so adorable.
I mean that is the greatest. I had a kid, my oldest kid wouldn't go anywhere without a Spider-Man costume for legit 2 years. That's the greatest.
My husband just came home, and so I'm going to see if he can get the twins. And so what was I going to say? So yeah, I've taught for a while and I enjoy it. And
Well, we love seeing your kids. We talked about last week that, usually my dog is with me, and, thinks that everybody needs to see him when I'm doing these, but
from I had you two classes last semester, and I remember it. So I'm going to listen now, but I'm going to turn my camera off. Feeling I'm going to have some friends in the background.
Come on.
yeah, I agree with Candace. Sometimes we need a little bit of extra entertainment. And so they're precious. I love it. Thank you. I'm glad to have you back in class. Anybody else that we missed from last time? I think we've got everybody. Let me just kind of scroll and look. Yeah. Well, glad to have everybody back. So since we don't have any questions and we've introduced everybody and we've gotten to see the twins and had some smiles and giggles, let's go ahead and get started tonight with some of the work. So I'm going to first do a share screen. So y'all tell me and holler at me if it's not sharing. So can y'all see my screen that shows our course? Okay, yeah, mine may look a little bit different than yours because I have a different view as the instructor, but just a reminder that we do have the instructor virtual office, which so far nobody's had anything to post, which is great, but just wanted to remind you that we do have that in case you have questions or anything like that. So everybody did great completing the assignments for week 1. All of you should have received your grades by now. If for some reason you did not get a grade, just email me because sometimes I'll enter a grade and I'll save it and then it like disappears. So I think we're good with everybody from when I checked earlier today. So let's look for just a second at week 2. So if you remember from last week and how we've talked about the course is actually structured, you will notice that you have the introduction, then of course your overview, and if you click on this, you'll see specifically what we're doing, our objectives, and then you will see the specific assignments. Now these should be, at least in theory, hot links where you can just click on it and it will take you to that reading or video or whatever. If that doesn't work, do a copy and paste. So copy this, paste it into your browser, and hopefully it'll open there. If that still doesn't work, then I'll show you where I have put these things, okay? So we also have a folder with that. Then you've got a video, and then you have a reflective essay. So that is found underneath the, let me back up, underneath the overview and objectives. Then you can come down here and look specifically for the articles. So as you can see, I have downloaded everything for you. So again, if for some reason that link doesn't work, you can also look here and see if it's there, okay? Then we have our assignment for this week, which is a reflective question. This is the first one of 3 that you'll do for the course. We have reflective questions in weeks 2, 4, and 6. And remember, this is due by Sunday night at 11:30 p.m. And when you answer the prompts, so you have basically 2 questions, you need to do at least a 1 to 3 paragraph essay using APA style in-text citations, if you have quotes or summaries or whatever, and then of course your reference or bibliography page. You do not have to do an abstract, you don't have to do a title page, all of that, but I will count off if you do not do the reference page and include some in-text citations. So yeah, you can see how many people have submitted, how many I need to grade, but that's for me and not for you guys. Okay, and then of course, finally, our Zoom meeting information is going to be posted every week for you. How do you access it, as well as the PowerPoint, and then I also put it in a PDF version because sometimes our Apple users have a little bit of trouble opening that PowerPoint presentation. So I will include it as well as a PDF, but it's the exact same thing. And then finally, we have just other documents and resources that you can use. So here is how I'm going to be grading your essay. And how the points work out. Don't look at the points up here because I realize that those are incorrect. I hadn't updated that the way I needed to, but I will get to that. So I'm going to open up week 3 for you guys really soon, like probably either later tonight or first thing tomorrow. So just know that we're going to be getting into our first case study, starting, like I said, tomorrow. Okay. So let me see if I can unshare now. Stop sharing. There we go. Okay, so do you guys have any questions or concerns so far about the first 2 weeks and the assignments? So just to recap real quickly, discussion forums, weeks 1, 3, and 5, reflective essays, weeks 2, 4, and 6, and then you will have 3 case studies. You have the first one, which opens in week 3, then in week 5, I believe, you will get the midterm, and then week 7 is your final exam, which is your 3rd case study. But like I said, I will try to get a little bit ahead of you guys and get things open. So if you want to work ahead, you can, but you certainly don't have to. Okay. So any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that so far? Okay, like I said, you guys are making my job way too easy.
Excuse me, I do have a question.
Go ahead.
Hold on, I'm sorry. I was trying to look at. Oh, this always happens.
That's okay, no worries.
Yeah. Okay. So the 3 questions that there's actually 3 questions in that reflective.
Yeah, there's actually only 2 for this week.
Okay, well, maybe I'm not seeing things correctly then, because when I'm looking at this.
Hang on one second here, and let me share again so we'll look at it again because I could be wrong. Okay, here we go. Sorry, let me make this full screen. Okay, so, oh, sorry. I'm sure you guys really do not care to see what I'm doing with GPAs right now. No, stay on page, hang on. Let me get back to my actual course as opposed to, like I said, looking at business documents. Okay, hang on, here we go. Okay, so let me take it off editing because that just is going to make it look funky. Turn editing off. There it goes. Okay, so let's pull it up again. So we're in week 2, and here is our reflective question. And yeah, here are your 2 questions. Why is it important to develop a data philosophy? I guess, yeah, there's 3. I just kind of put 2 of them into one bullet. How would you use this to develop a framework or overview? And then how and why is data storytelling a powerful and useful tool? So yeah, technically you're correct. There are 3.
Okay, so that's why I asked the question, because you said 2 and I saw 3. I just wanted to make sure that. So do you want the why is it important to develop data philosophy, and how would you use this to develop data framework or overview? You want that together, or do you want them individually answered?
Certainly you need to address all 3 questions. Now, how you choose to do that, if you want to do each question as a separate paragraph, you can do that. If you want to combine the first 2 questions into a single paragraph, that's fine too. Yeah, because they're certainly talking about the same concept, and that's in terms of developing a data philosophy. But like, so you can structure it however you want. I don't have a particular structure in mind or that I'm expecting. You guys have the flexibility. Just thoroughly answer both questions. Okay.
Okay.
Anybody else? Elena, we like your cat.
Yeah, he won't get down. He must like the camera.
Well, since we don't have my little dog Milo with us tonight, because I'm still at the office. And yeah, look, we have beautiful new offices. I'm so excited. But anyway, so we're glad to have some of our animal friends with us.
So-
Okay, so any
so-
other questions, guys?
Yeah, I don't want you to, feel that we don't want that, that you're, that we're shy. So I won't be. So I looked at the video
Mhm.
and talked about a step-by-step process. It talked about prepare, inquire, and act.
Mhm.
So can you just give me briefly, inside of those three processes, they talk about 8 different things that you would do to in that step process. I guess it was some Murphy School in Boston, I guess.
Mhm.
So can you just give me something briefly on how what each one of these things means? The first thing it says organize for collaborative work. What is that process? What does that entail?
Well, actually, I think once we go through the PowerPoint tonight, this
No,
may
okay.
make a little bit more sense, but if it doesn't, be sure and ask me at the end, okay?
So there's you have a PowerPoint that's relative to this?
Yes, I do. I'm about to show it to you guys.
Okay, well, see, I'm sorry I jumped ahead, but
No, you're fine. You're absolutely fine. And please, yeah, feel free to jump in at any time. And the particular video in the school that you guys watch, they're using what's called the data-wise process, which was actually developed by Harvard, their Graduate School of Education. And so, if you want a lot of in-depth information on that, then, just a Google search on data-wise from Harvard will pull up all kinds of explanations and stuff. I'm not expecting you guys to go that deeply with your reflective essay. You don't have to go into each one of those components and give me information or whatever. You can be much more global than that when we do that. So let me stop sharing this and I'm going to pull up our PowerPoint. Okay. All righty, let me come back to share my screen. Okay, here we go. Okay, so, one of the things that when we start thinking about data, there's a group of individuals out there that think that we as teachers or as educators, principals, whatever role we've assumed, that we need to be data experts. Now, I guess I have a little bit of pushback on that idea in the sense of I don't know that teachers need to be data experts in terms of all of the data that a school or a school district or whatever collects, but teachers do need to be experts within their own data and really know where their students are currently, where they need to get to, and how they're performing on any given standard or concept. But why is that important? Well, we know that if you're a data expert, it really is going to help you to do a better job of connecting learning and teaching to what your students need. So let me give you an example. Oftentimes people just start at the beginning of a textbook or a beginning of a curriculum and they just teach straight through. Well, they don't take the time to pre-assess their students to determine what they already know. We also know too that there's way much more content that curriculums and standards ask you to cover than there's sufficient time to do it and teach it to depth and complexity. So when we know where our students are and what they've already mastered, as well as what are those gaps in their learning, we can do a better job of target teaching. So, kind of the way that I look at it is, if you go to the doctor and you say, I think I broke my foot, and the doctor decides that they need to do a chest x-ray, they want to look at and do an MRI on your brain, they're looking at everything. When really all you need them to do is to diagnose whether or not you have a broken foot and to do the tests necessary to determine if that's true or not. We need to be the same way with teaching. We cannot teach literally everything we're expected to teach. So we have to pinpoint and target our teaching by understanding and knowing our student data. It also helps us to really, I think, open up dialogues with our colleagues So, for example, when I was a principal, one of the things that we had noticed in our data review for the school as a whole was our students were not doing very well in vocabulary. This happened to be a high school. So then when we did our instructional rounds and classroom visits, lo and behold, we figured out pretty quickly why our students weren't doing very well in vocabulary, because most of our teachers were teaching vocabulary by, here's your vocabulary list. So your homework on Monday night is to go home and define all the words. Your homework on Tuesday night is to go home and use the words in a sentence. And then on Friday, we're going to have a quiz. That is not the best way to teach students vocabulary. So we taught all of our teachers, it was part of our professional development, how to use the Deborah Pickering and Robert Rosano vocabulary model, which is vastly different. Well, guess what? The students actually started really learning the words, internalizing the words, using the words, etc. And so we saw a pretty significant increase in a single year on how well our students were doing with vocabulary, because we looked at the data. We went out and saw what was actually going on to pinpoint the root cause of the problem. Then we did professional development to remedy that. Then we did the follow-up and coaching to get our teachers where they needed to be. And we saw the improvement in our overall student achievement scores. If we had just said there's a problem with vocabulary and we started pounding everybody about vocabulary, we wouldn't have seen those results. So that's why understanding and being a data expert can be very, very helpful. But like I said, there's different levels of being an expert. And we also have to, as I just gave you an example, realize that our test data that we use, and we talked about this a little bit last week, has to be much more than that end of the year test. That test that the students in, in geometry, the test that they took the previous year in algebra, yeah, it's good to know the results, but you know what? It's historical data. And it's a year old by the time that not a year old, but anywhere from 3 to 6 months old by the time the students get into their next course. So yeah, we need to look at it, but I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time on there. So how do you become a data expert? How do you decide what data you need and how you're going to use it? So the first 2 questions that you have to ask yourself is, what do I hope to do with my data? And what is my desired outcome? So if my desired outcome, as I told you in my example, was to improve vocabulary, knowledge, comprehension, usage, all of those things for all of our students in our school. So if that's my desired outcome, what kind of data do I need to use and how do I decide what I want to do with it? So the first step in the process is really to develop a data philosophy, okay? And a lot of times I think people shortchange, quite honestly, the pre-work that we have to do before we just jump in and do data or form a professional learning community or anything like that. So developing a data philosophy should answer 3 questions. What role should data play in our school? What role should data play in our classrooms? And what role should data play in student success? Until we really know the answers to those questions, like I said, we talked about this a lot last week. People just dump all kinds of data on you as a teacher, and they expect you to master it, know it, do something with it, disaggregate the data, all of that kind of stuff. But if we take the time before we get into that and answer these questions and come to consensus, we can do a much better job of targeting and sharing data that's going to be really beneficial and helpful to our students as well as our teachers. Once we know what those answers are, then we should see that we should also look at, let me back up, what are those sub-questions we need to answer? So how will we use data to support the vision, mission, and values of the school? So for example, when I first went to Irving MacArthur in Texas, one of the things that was painfully evident was that there was a lot of discipline issues. And we knew we had to get that school back under control. That was probably our first big issue we had to tackle. And part of the vision and mission of the school was obviously to prepare students for life beyond high school, whatever that meant, whether it was college and career ready, the military, whatever. So if that's in our vision and mission, then we have to look at the data and see, does that data tell me if we're meeting those goals. Well, obviously we weren't meeting those goals because we were pretty out of control. We also have to think about what role is data going to play in school improvement. So, as a principal, you're tasked with getting a school improvement plan done. And there's data that goes in there that, quite frankly, my teachers really didn't need the data, like what's the average years of experience for a teacher, what's our ethnic and racial breakdowns, that kind of stuff. Yes, it's important for me to know as a leader, but it wasn't something that I needed to share with our teachers. We put it out there if you wanted to look at it, but I didn't spend a lot of time because, again, as a teacher, their jobs are to impact student achievement and student academic performance. So this other data, while important, wasn't something that we needed to disaggregate and go through in depth with our teachers. How am I going to communicate data to stakeholders? So I believe in transparency. I think that is really the most critical element of accountability. So we had plans for what data went to whom or to whom. So for example, what data was it that we shared with the teachers, and we asked them to get their fingers dirty with and to do those deep data digs. What was the data we shared with our parents? What data did we share with our community? What data did we share with our students? We had very targeted plans so that we knew exactly what data was going to be put out there and looked at, analyzed, discussed, etc. We also have to make sure we know how we're going to act on the data, because one of the things that just drives me crazy, but I've seen it happen in school after school after school, we give people all kinds of data. And they may even spend some time disaggregating or analyzing it, but they don't ever do anything with the data. If you are spending time understanding, looking at, and analyzing data, but you are not then changing something, or affirming something as a result of that data analyzation, then you are wasting your time. And like I said, that's where most schools get stuck. They give you tons more information than you can possibly digest and use, and then nothing comes out of that process in terms of how we impact students, teaching, and learning. And then, of course, what data are we going to use to make those mid-course adjustments? I'm about to start reading and doing some grant reviews for the United States Department of Education. And I will tell you, I've done this many times. Almost every single grant, the reason that they get marked down is because they don't talk about mid-course adjustments or how they're going to use data to make mid-course adjustments to change their plan. So very, very critical element that very few people understand and get. So the first thing you're going to do when you start thinking about data is develop that data philosophy. You're going to start with your main 3 critical questions. Then you're going to do your sub questions. Then from there, you can develop a data overview. Okay. Now, part of the data overview process, and you guys are going to see a little bit more of this once you get into the case study, is the first thing you have to do is identify the tests we give. So what are the tests that we're required to give? Okay, so the state tells me that you have to take X tests every year. But then again, what are those tests that we choose to give? And in some districts, there can be some negotiation about district level benchmarks or parish level benchmarks, etc. Some, there is no negotiation. So for example, when I was principal in Irving, we were rated as a recognized school, which would, that in the old system, that was, the only tier higher was exemplary, which was almost impossible, truthfully, for a high school to get. And so I was able to negotiate because we were sitting at a recognized district school. We were a National Blue Ribbon School of Excellence. We had a lot of good things happening thanks to a great team there. So I was able to negotiate that we didn't want to give the district benchmarks because we had our own formative assessment system that we were using that was working very effectively. So I negotiated our way out of those benchmark tests. Now, conversely, when I was a principal in the Dallas ISD, there wasn't no negotiation about the benchmarks. We had to give them. But if you take time to know which ones are required and which ones you choose, that can be really helpful in defining your data. Then the other thing we need to do is to look at the types of data that is going to best inform instruction. Okay, so we have to look at it, what data is going to help us with overall school improvement planning, to ensure highly effective instruction, to help our students track and monitor their own progress. How do we let our parents know what our students are mastering? And then what is it that the community wants to know so that they can make those informed decisions as a community? Let's talk for a second here about the parents and content mastery. I could do a whole class, I think, on grading. But one of the things that we have seen a lot of research around, I guess is the best way to put it, is the unreliability of grades and what they really mean. So, you know, just because a student gets an A in a class, does that really mean they master the content? Or did they jump through all the hoops and complete all the assignments, et cetera, that a teacher wanted them to do? And they got an A because they're a great compliant student who has good time management organization, or does it really show content mastery? So I'll never forget, I had a student when I was at Irving MacArthur who was extremely bright. I mean, like super, you know, one of those kids that's just really, really got it together in terms of, you know, their intuitiveness and intelligence, et cetera. He ended up being a National Merit Scholar, which is a really big deal. And he was failing. I thought I wasn't going to get him graduated because he was failing all of his classes. And here was what we figured out. He could not do a single piece of homework. He could act like in class he wasn't paying attention, he didn't participate. But when the teacher gave the test, he could ace that test and always made an A or an A, you know, I mean, did very, very well. But the way the teachers had their grading system structured, he was being penalized for not doing his homework and classroom assignments and all these other things. So the question became, does he fail the course because he didn't do the things the teacher asked? Or does he pass the course because if the test that the teachers are administering really measures his concept knowledge and his mastery of the objectives, and he's passing those with an A, should he get an A? So, you know, that's a story for another time, but we have to really think about that in terms of what parents understand when we talk about sharing data with them. Is it about the classroom context, or is it really about the mastery of content? We also have to understand that the context does matter. So I'm not going to walk you through all of these, but you know, data really, the best kind of data is current, it's useful, and it arises almost organically out of what the teachers do on a day-to-day basis with our students. So remember we talked last week about, you know, that kind of an exit ticket or that daily formative assessment can be so invaluable to really how we ensure that all of our students are being successful. So if we think about how do you do data? So some of you've taken the EDL 700 Professional Learning Communities class with me, and we talk a lot about in the professional learning community, you know, those three critical questions. What do we need our students to know? How do I know if they're learning it? And what do I do when my students don't learn it? That goes along with data as well. So I know one of the structures that, you know, I've seen schools put into place is that they have weekly PLC meetings, but every month, the first meeting of the month maybe is going to be a data PLC meeting. So those questions that we would use typically in an effective professional learning community change just a little bit for a data professional learning community or a data meeting. So are my students demonstrating growth? Okay. What do I need to do to change or accelerate their growth? And then what do I do for my students who need remediation? So very similar to the questions that you would use in a professional learning community, but these questions specifically are grounded in data. So we are very bad about going into our our classrooms and shutting our doors and doing our own thing. And we tend to treat data the same way. So data cannot exist by itself in a silo. It has to be an integral, interwoven part of everything that we do within a school. And we also have to make sure too that we're using data to drive our practice so that we're ensuring that all of our students get the best first instruction that they can possibly get. And so data-driven instruction should be used not only to design teaching and learning, but also for our curriculum, for our assessment, for all of those things that we put into our classrooms and into our students to ensure that everything is working. Now, there are a million different data models out there. So just for the sake of the course, though, we really are going to focus on two models. And these are probably the two that I would say are the most used. They have a ton of research that backs them up. And I think they're probably, just in my opinion, the most effective in terms of kind of pushing a school to use data effectively. So the first one, which looks like this weird little kind of, I don't know, it's like the arrow thing that starts with prepare, inquire, act. This is what Mr. McCombs was asking us about a minute ago. And here are the 8 elements. That is the data-wise data model from Harvard. And like I said, it's very widely used, particularly by schools in the North and the East. They do a ton of research and development and all those kind of things with this model. So the data-wise model says that there's 3 basic things you have to do in order to effectively use data. You have to prepare, you have to inquire, and you have to act. So what does that mean in action? So when you're preparing, the first thing you have to do is organize for collaborative work. Data should not be done in isolation. And I will tell you, when I was a rookie principal, I was just so proud that the first day of professional development, when the teachers come back, I have disaggregated all this data. And I'm so excited to make you sit and listen to me talk about it for an entire day. That was probably the worst thing I could do because I knew the data because I spent a lot of time dealing with it. But that didn't mean because I presented it to my poor faculty that they had internalized it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to prepare and think about how are we going to collaboratively look at our data. The second thing that I have to do is I also have to ensure that we really understand our assessments. So how do we build that assessment literacy? So for example, in Texas, we were giving back then the tax test, and then we went on to, some other tests, the EOCs, blah, blah, blah. But I really had to help my teachers know their assessments. Because when we think about that curriculum, instruction, and assessment, triad or cycle, if we don't know the assessment and what's being asked on the assessment, how it's being asked, what standard it's aligned to, et cetera, then we could do all this data stuff and it wouldn't matter. So we spent time looking at release tests, questions, benchmarks, and all that so that we could build that assessment literacy. So the first thing I did was we had our PLCs, and ours were by content or by grade level when I was an elementary principal. Then we spent time in our professional learning communities building that assessment literacy. So understanding the tests that our students were going to be taking. Then when we moved into the inquiry process, we created a data overview. So we talked about that just a few minutes ago with those key questions. So we went through that process and did that. Then we began to dig into that student data. So that was the analysis and disaggregation process, the discussion, etc. Then we talked about and looked at instruction. So what are those, how are we actually instructing our students? So as I gave you my example, so we were not doing very well in vocabulary. We looked at our vocabulary practice and we figured out real quickly that the problem was instructional. It wasn't with the students. So we fixed that by acting. How did we act? We developed an action plan, which for us was a professional development. So we did that. Then not only did we implement a plan, we had to assess whether or not it was working. Well, how do we assess that? For us, we did it by observation. And by the way, when I talk about instructional rounds, that didn't mean it was just administrators going in and evaluating teachers. That's not at all what we did. We had teams of teachers. Everybody was on a team. Everybody got observed. Everybody observed somebody in groups. And, you know, an instructional round is basically like a medical round. So we walk in the classroom, we're focusing only on vocabulary. So you go in, you diagnose the problem, you come out, you talk about it, here's the problem, here's some possible root causes, here's some possible solutions. Then we look for trends across classrooms and you come up with a plan to act. So that's the data-wise model. The second model is from Paul Bambrick Santoyo, and it's from data-driven instruction. I know this is used in a lot of urban schools. You know, some of the big, huge school districts have adopted this. So data-driven instruction is very similar. The only thing that's a little bit different really is the verbiage, and they see it more as a circular cycle. At the core is student achievement, which of course makes sense. And then if you talk about they have 4 big quadrants that they expect us to look at. So that is going to include a data-driven dialogue, feedback, instructionally relevant questions, and then more feedback. So you're constantly looking at data, then you give some feedback, then you look at instruction using instructional driven questions, then you give some more feedback, and you keep doing that. To be more specific, you can see each one of these. So you know, if you pick a place to start, you have to start with collecting your data, then you've got to analyze it, then you've got to interpret it, then you have to select your actions, then you monitor your results, you have to frame a question around it, then you talk about it some more, and you keep doing that. So I put the 2 models side by side, excuse me, because they're not that different. It just really depends on if your district has mandated one or if you prefer one over the other. I have used both models as a principal as well as, you know, an assistant superintendent in Dallas and in Irving. Okay, and we'll spend more time talking about those in depth, but that just kind of gives you an overview. So when we talk about data, and I'm going to stop here in just a minute. We're not going to get through all of this tonight, and I never intended for us to, quite frankly. So if we think about sort of in that big picture, so you know, I hear people talk about data-driven instruction all the time, but they really don't know what that means. So data-driven instruction or data-driven decision-making is really a system that revolves around how we collect, analyze, and interpret data. So those are the 3 critical pieces. Then how do we use what we've analyzed, examined, interpreted, and collected to inform our practice? And when I say inform our practice, that really gets down to how do we use that information to impact teaching and learning in every single classroom for every single child. Okay, so we know too that we have lots of data. I'm not going to read this to you, but we get it from, you know, like I said, I honestly and truly, I printed one time every data report I got. I don't know why I did this. And it was over 300 pages. So it can be very overwhelming. But we're going to talk more as we get a little bit further into the course about how do you get through and decide what is most critical as opposed to just doing that sort of overwhelming, here's 300 pages of data, figure it out. There is a way to actually do that when we implement models and really know what's most important and those areas where we need to spend our time. Okay, so with that being said, like I said, we'll pick up next week and do some more in-depth discussion and talk about particularly literacy, data literacy, how technology can help us, some of the tools that are out there, ways that we can track, and then we'll finally get into and talk some more about data teams. So with that being said, what questions or comments or concerns do you guys have? Are y'all just like, it is 6:18, please give us 12 minutes back of our lives tonight?
Sorry, again, will you be leaving this, that your PowerPoint, is that already in your resources on the It is?
Yes,
Okay.
it is. It's actually in the link for the Zoom meeting in week 2. And then when I email out the recording to everybody, I also include the PowerPoint then again. But yeah, it's actually in several places.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Did I see anybody else? Sorry, I'm not seeing everybody. I've got this weird sort of view going on tonight. I don't know what it is.
I have a quick question, Tracy.
Sure, go
Just
ahead.
because you kind of brought it up in the PowerPoint about the grades versus showing ability versus what you've turned in for work, because we are having this discussion at our school right now with things being virtual. There are several students who just aren't turning anything in, and all those zeros are just really bringing their scores down. And so we're getting like a little pushback from administration about like, maybe we shouldn't put zeros, maybe we should put 60s so it doesn't draw their grade down so low. And if they can pass the test, then that's what matters. So I'm just kind of curious to know what you think of all this since you brought it up.
Yeah, no, and Susan, I think that's a great question. There are even some districts across the country that have a policy that the lowest grade a teacher can enter into the grade book is a 50. And they quote, did that for the very reason you're talking about. I think we have to just be honest with our grading and explain to our students and our parents that, look, we're not only grading on content mastery, okay, or standards mastery is probably a better way to put it. We're also teaching your child time management, organizational skills, all of these other soft skills that are essential, particularly when you're in a virtual learning environment. And if you want your child to be successful beyond getting an A or a B or an F in a particular class, but to be successful in college, to be successful at a job, to manage their lives as an adult, these are part of the skills that we have to teach to you. And if we fail to do that, you might get an A and graduate from high school, but you have absolutely no ability to manage and govern your life. So I think kids get the grade they earned. I mean, and you know, if that means it's a 0 and it's bringing their grades way down, that's fine. Now, I do believe in redemption now. So, you know, some people are like, you got a 0, and if you don't turn it in by the 3rd day, you get the highest grade you can get to 70. And if you don't turn it in by the 5th day, the highest grade you get to 50. They basically make it impossible for the student. I'm more about what I would call outcome-based, that at the end of the day, I want you to do the work, because the work that I'm assigning to you, if it's aligned to what you need to know, and that's aligned to the assessment, then you will get benefit from doing the work. So I don't care if you it's just like I treat you guys. I don't care if you turn it in the very last day, because if my work is meaningful, then there's a reason to do it. But I will tell you, from that sort of leadership big picture, there's a lot of people out there who assign tons of homework, tons of assignments that is nothing more than busy work. And so I think the key questions you have to ask as a group, you know, at your school, is our work meaningful? Is it aligned to our assessment, to the standards, and is it going to prepare students for what they need to know to truly master a concept? So you have to spend some time looking at your assignments. And if you can honestly say, yes, everything is aligned, it's meaningful and beneficial, then give the kids the grade that they earned, but give them redemption opportunities so that just be, you know, because, and I guess, I don't know, in a virtual environment, I have 2 granddaughters. And one of them is very self-motivated, great self-starter, all that kind of stuff. And when she gets stuck, she asks for help, all that. My youngest granddaughter, who is probably more just in terms of sheer IQ, that's a terrible thing to say, probably has a higher IQ than all of us. She's extremely gifted, but she's also extremely ADHD. And she's the kid who can go in and make 100 on a test. And she's like, oh, homework? I had homework? You know, she needs 10,000 reminders and timers and all this kind of stuff. Thankfully,
I had a son like that. Yeah.
yeah, thankfully she has a support system at home that makes that happen, but a lot of our kids don't.
But can I ask her for
Yeah.
the assignments that they're talking about, the way your virtual stuff is set up? Are you talking about the kids are getting zeros on like homework, or they're getting zeros for classwork? Do they attend class virtually, or you're talking about things that you post, like for instance on Google Classroom, and they're supposed to complete and they're just not doing it on their own?
So I teach math. So homework is a given, like, but it's not like homework is given as you're, walking out the door at the end of class. I give time in class for homework to be started so that if there's any questions or any confusion, I'm there to help out. But they're
But we're
just
talking
not,
about your virtual kids, right?
yeah. And hybrid, we're hybrid. So we have a few kids that come in. It's not being turned in at all. And it could also be things like we were required to do a catalyst and an exit ticket every day, which is fine. I could ask, like, how was your weekend? And they just won't even do it. It's just like
Are they in class with you? Virtually,
No.
are they in class?
Yes, they are in class with me. They are counted present with me,
Okay.
but
so
they
have
just
to
won't
attend,
hit the submit button.
and they're not hitting submit. Okay, that's what I was wondering, because see, we did the virtual thing too, but it was completely different at the beginning of the year. The kids were not required to attend virtually. They were encouraged, but not required. So the teachers had no way to hold them accountable. So see, that's where that whole zero thing comes into play. I can understand your administration telling you, if the kid was present in class that day and they were legit with you, I can understand them saying, okay, you could give them a 50. If they were in class, they were participating, on your Zoom for your class time or whatever, and say you told them to do said exit ticket and whatnot, and they didn't, and your rule is to not put zeros in the grade book, because I'm like Tracy, I don't like zeros. I don't care if it takes you to the last day before the report card. Me giving you a zero doesn't do you any good. It only says that you didn't do the work.
Right. And that's their thing. They're saying, well, this is a behavioral problem, the behavior of
Right.
not turning in
Well,
work, not
and
really
if you
showing
had
what
them
you
in
know or don't
school,
know.
And unfortunately, if we had them in school, right, you would give up your lunch and your recess and your break and all your things to make them do the work. But that's not the case because they're virtual. But being a virtual student, if you don't penalize them in some way for not doing the work, but they're making straight A's on the test, I guess it depends, are your tests proctored? Do you know if they're taking the test on their own? Is their mama sitting next to them, taking the test with them? How is the test being taken? There's so many things that, go into play with that. But like, I wouldn't see a problem. If you give somebody a 50, you're not making an A in a class if you get a 50 on every class assignment I ever give you. You're
Right.
still going to end up with a bad grade.
Right.
But as far as homework goes, you could exempt those. I mean, hopefully you guys aren't given homework that's worth a high percentage of your grades anyway, because that's just not good practice for any school.
Right.
So you could exempt them from every homework assignment you ever give, and it shouldn't make a difference, because homework essentially is, a reflection of what we learned in class. But if they're already not doing the classwork, what good is the homework? You don't even know if they can do the classwork. What good is the homework going to do? So I think it would more.
Yeah, I don't know right now what our grades are reflecting, because as you said, the tests are not proctored. I put it online. They sometimes don't turn it in at the end of the class period. So then I say, okay, well, you have till the weekend. Like I just did this. I gave a test on Friday. You have till the end of the weekend. It is Wednesday, and I've only had 5 kids. I've had 5 kids turn in the test out of 15. So yeah, and this is a test. This isn't homework.
Yeah, and
So
that's a bigger problem. That's not a you problem.
Right.
That's a school problem.
Right.
That's not a you and your class problem. You can't solve that,
Right.
By yourself.
And the bottom line is, it is an EOC class. If they pass the EOC, I pass them with a 67 because you've passed the final exam.
Yeah.
No matter what your grade is.
Yeah,
So-
and Susan, I think that the world of virtual learning has created more issues and problems than any of us were prepared to address. Now, I
Yeah.
will tell you that, in virtual learning, one of the things that we do, in here at LSUS, at least in the College of Business, is we use a service called Proctorio or Proctor U, depending on the course, where every test is proctored. And we had to do that because, we've been online now for many years and been very successful. And, I don't use it because I can tell if you're plagiarizing because of the nature of the assignments. But if it's a traditional test, we have to do it. But I don't think that most pre-K-12 schools or districts, parishes have even thought about how do you proctor in a virtual environment. Because
Some
you
of us
guys were-
have.
have you? Good for you.
Yeah.
I'm really, like I said, there's
Yeah.
a few, but there are not very many because
No.
most schools were very, very unprepared for virtual learning.
We had to, Tracy, because I know we talked about this last semester, but a lot of them
Yeah.
probably don't know. My school is almost half ELL, so we have a
Yeah.
high Hispanic population. So their parents, it's not their parents helping them, but we
Right.
had to proctor the test for another reason, not because they were cheating, but because they legit couldn't read the words.
Right.
So my teachers had to proctor the test out of another reason because we wanted the test to get done and
Right.
it wasn't being done. So my teachers had to proctor the test while in class full time during the
Mhm.
day. And it was quite the ordeal, but anyway.
Yeah, and I was in the Irving School District, and back in 2000, we gave every single high school student in the district a laptop to take home with them, and they were expected to use it. So they've been doing, we had online classes, and we gave kids options, and they've been doing that for 21 years now. So they've got it down. Whereas Dallas ISD, virtual learning, what? Computers in the hands of kids? Have you lost your minds? I mean, and sadly, they've really struggled because they were completely unprepared. So Susan,
Yeah,
there's not.
our district even had to purchase like hotspots
Yep.
to be able to, we had to hand deliver them
Oh, absolutely. We
students
did too. And
in our
Chromebooks.
neighborhoods. Like it was that they didn't have computers, they didn't have internet, they didn't have, the moms were coming to the school with their cell phones and they were like, help me. And I was like, hold on, let me get somebody who speaks Spanish. I'll be right back.
Right.
Yeah.
We had a lot of that as well. And so, but
Yeah.
also we are like what's called, a trauma informed school. And so that's what they're talking about. Like if we are a trauma informed school, then we shouldn't be penalizing them for the behavior of not turning in their work.
Right.
So
And Susan, too, this, I don't even know if this is possible, but one of the things that we did in Irving back in 2000 was we went to the city and said, we're about to deploy laptops to all of our students. And they were like, okay, so they made free Wi-Fi access available anywhere in the city, because they understood that same thing, we were predominantly second language learners, we were predominantly minority, predominantly low SES. And when I say predominantly, I'm talking like 80 and 90%, guys. That was our population of students. And we knew there was this huge digital divide, and if our students were going to be competitive, the only way that we could get them there was to close that gap. So, I think that you just, in terms of the grades, my teachers really pushed back when we tried to do the 50. So the compromise became you can give them a 0 on the homework assignment that they didn't do or turn in. But if they participate with you for a full, let's say 45 minutes in a Zoom classroom meeting, they get 100 in classroom participation and they're weighted equally. And I don't know why my teachers didn't figure out the game we played with them, but it did at least award the kids, because again, if you're going to be in my class, you should benefit from the time and learn something. And so, that was how we addressed it and handled it. Okay, any other questions, guys? I know we're about 3 minutes over.
Another
You're
question.
fine. We
Yeah.
went over last week too, because, you know, you guys have great ideas. So I'd rather you talk to each other than listen to me anyway. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering, I'm in New Jersey, they discontinued standardized testing for the
Wow.
students because, basically our last day of school was March 13th, in-person school was
Mhm.
March 13th, 2020. And so they basically discontinued standardized testing. I wonder if that's
Forever?
huh? No,
Forever?
no. Well, forever is a long time, but no, it's not forever. It's actually it's until
So
we
it's
get
on hiatus.
yeah.
So
Well,
we didn't do it last year either.
Yeah, I
that's
think a
what-
lot of,
yes.
just schools and states did sort of a moratorium on standardized testing because of last year and the fact that we just couldn't figure it out. But I know here at LSUS, for example, we're planning to be back to normal, whatever that's going to mean, in the fall. And so that'll be our students back on campus and all that. And so from what I'm hearing, that since they're expecting schools to be pretty much fully operational by the fall again, the rumors I'm hearing come out of the state boards is that standardized testing will resume in 2022.
Yeah, that's what's going to happen here. So I did hear some tail end of some conversation, and what we were told to do last year in our third marking period was that we couldn't give a student a grade less than a 71.
Ooh. Ooh.
For the third marking period, because the third marking period kind of was like interrupted by the pandemic. So we couldn't give a student less than a 71.
So
And
how
then
did
and-
the teachers react to that? I'm curious.
not real well.
Yeah.
I mean, because I understand that the students were learning under some very tough, circumstances, but I was also teaching under some very tough circumstances, and I was still asked to perform, and I had no excuses to be able to give about, teaching virtually. So I had issues with you telling me that I could only give a student, I couldn't give them less than a 71. And if they got less than a 71, then they were exempted from that assignment.
Wow.
So, and then marking period 4, you couldn't give a student less than a 60 for a final exam. And if the student failed, then I was asked to change the student's grade, and I said, put that in writing, and they said no. and what happened was I went back and looked at the student's transcript, and some of the students that failed my classes, my grade was overridden by administration.
Ooh. Okay. Well, in some states.
So I'm
Yeah.
just saying that this is like, I know we're living under some really, really tough times, but I just don't think that the administrators' answer to those problems is just not what I think is, I think that those students that graduated last year, they're going to be operating at a disadvantage, and the students that we're dealing with right now, that are going to graduate this year, they're also going to operate at a disadvantage when they go to the next level. So anyway.
I think at a greater
Fun.
disadvantage. Yeah.
Yeah, I will tell you from the college perspective, because I work with incoming freshmen and I teach freshman seminar. I will tell you, the students that we are seeing right now, I had a pretty good understanding of the gaps between high school and college already. I did a lot of work around that in Texas from that perspective, and I've done a ton of research. Oh my gosh, guys, they can't even write a simple paragraph. That's how bad it is. And we're now, and we put them in developmental courses, which I don't get credit for, and all that. And it's just a tragedy. And I'm like, we've got to do better. And so I really hate it when administrators make blanket statements, or they put out these policies and they don't take the time to involve the teachers and I understand the problem and analyze not only the data and the transcripts, but more importantly, what is the appropriate thing to do? And there's usually not going to be a simple policy that I can just say, well, only give this grade. You have to be, it's much more nuanced than that for the benefit of the students, as well as to respect and honor the work that you guys are doing as teachers. So, like I said, we won't solve that obviously in this class, but
yeah, that's frowned upon to change your teachers' grades like that.
in Texas, there were only 2 circumstances. This is a state policy, where as a principal, I could change a grade. One was if there was a calculation error that we caught. The second was if the teacher had violated a state or district policy regarding the way that they figured grades. If I changed a grade for any other reason, I would not only be terminated, I would lose my certification for the rest of my life. It was a big deal. So, wow, I can't believe that they went in and did that.
But like you understand the concept behind the not failing. We had some pushback too at a district and school levels here in Louisiana too, especially in Livingston Parish, because it's a high performing parish. And we had pushback, and they wanted you to not fail kids because of the pandemic, because we went out. Now, of course, we went out with what basically was at the end of the third quarter for us. Right. So they were okay. Twins bedtime. Okay, yeah, I know we talk too much. Sorry, but they were okay with us giving the grades what they had for 39 weeks. But the fourth 9 weeks, I understand the concern for not wanting to fail kids unless they really needed to fail. And we had to have a serious meeting with all of our teachers, and we had to seriously consider who needed to fail and not fail, and really, really look at grades that were given in fourth 9 weeks, because for every one good teacher, and this is sadly true, who was actually teaching and was actually doing quality instruction, there were 5 who were not.
Right.
Some because they were not prepared to do such a thing. Some because they had never done such a thing and didn't have the capacity. Because let's face it, a lot of teachers who have been teaching for a very long time had no idea what to do with online learning. And they were just thrown into it. And a lot of teachers that were teaching traditionally and were wonderful, wonderful teachers couldn't cope with it when it happened like that. Not to mention it was because of this big scary thing that had happened. So it wasn't just one reason why that happened. So we had teachers who were brand new teachers who didn't even know what to do with themselves. We had teachers who were, I don't want to say too old, but very experienced, but not in the technology world, and were doing things. I mean, shoot, I knew a teacher who was still using an overhead projector. I mean, those of us that are old, we know what that is, okay? But, then it just was a fact. So for every one teacher who was doing good instruction, those of us in admin and, like Miss Tracy, she knows there were 5 who weren't. And they were just giving fluff. And you were just clicking things. Oh, yes, everyone did wonderful on that today. And so there you got into the fact of you were either failing everybody or everybody had A's. So we really, really had to look at those grades from fourth 9 weeks and decide who, based on the other grading periods, really needed to pass or be retained.
Yeah.
So that's where the concern came from. But it's frowned upon to just change people's grades.
Yeah, well, it happened, trust me. But I'm sure that they covered their tracks. But
well, you can bet.
but it happened. So I'll just say one thing.
It probably did it as far as they're concerned.
Yeah, and it wasn't just the passing, failing them. It was also students that were trying to get into college that they didn't want their GPAs affected.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, it's kind of like Candace said, for every teacher who's busting their tails and trying to do what's right and do the best thing you can. You've got 5 who aren't. It's the same thing with campus and district leadership. You'll have one who's going to have a conversation, teacher by teacher, student by student, to make sure we're awarding the correct and fair grade for that student. You're going to have 5 who will just say, here's a policy, here's what you're going to do. And if you don't do it, I'm going to go behind you and change your grades and do that. And that's just the reality, unfortunately.
So
So,
I won't hold you any longer, but I just want to let Candace know, because she made 2 old references. Candace, I'm 70 years old, Candace.
oh my gosh.
And
And
we're just
I-
going to keep you because we love it that you retired from something else and you wanted to be a teacher. You are like a rock star. We're going to
Yeah.
keep you.
I'm 70 years old, and when June comes, I got everybody in my family has a master's except me, because I wanted my family to succeed. So now it's my turn. So
Good for you.
And we want to all zoom into your graduation and be there.
That's
Hey,
right.
listen,
Absolutely.
Because you are a rock star.
well,
Who wants to be a teacher after you retired from something else? And then you want to, like, I've always wanted to be a teacher, so I retired, and now here I am. You're just a rock star. We're going to keep you.
well, thank you.
Well, guys, I'm going to go ahead and end for tonight because we're about 15 minutes over. And next time I'll leave more time for discussion. So it's
All
good
right.
to see y'all. Great discussion. Love the conversation. But we will see you guys next week. Y'all take
See you
care.
next week. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.